Thank you, everyone, and thank you for having me. I know that you're at the end of a long conference and a long day, so I appreciate you being here and also for sitting through this presentation in English. I'm Nicole Jones, and I work for Google at our headquarters in California. In my role at Google, I handle issues that cross many different areas of Google and how we handle security issues, and that's what I was going to speak with you about today. So we're going to talk about this in a few different ways. Google approaches security from all angles, and I'm going to talk about how we use security for our own systems, what we do for the security of our users' accounts, some of the things that we do for the internet and users around the world as a whole, and a little bit about our people and some resources at Google. So starting with the big one, encryption. Encryption is an important part of our security strategy. We're always looking at ways to protect our networks, protect our users from various adversaries, and encryption can be a really important tool. This graphic shows some of the various ways that encryption touches on our network and our users. The top box is Google, so our own network, our own infrastructure. So with regards to that, we have our data inside our data centers is encrypted at rest. We have also rolled out so that all of the links between our data centers, all the data going between them is encrypted in transit. You can also see the box on the left that we provide some encryption options to our users. So if you're using a Chromebook with the Chrome OS, or if you're using our newer Android devices, those devices also have encryption options so that there's encryption for the user at the device level. In addition to that, we've rolled out SSL and TLS to encrypt the connections between Google and our users. Actually, before I go to that, one more comment about TLS. So Gmail, of course, supports TLS so that all of the emails, they're going between Gmail users. So if I'm using Gmail and so are you, all of the communications that we have are going to be encrypted in transit. But of course, there are many users who are communicating with people who don't use Gmail. And if those providers aren't using TLS, then the communications, again, are open to being intercepted along the way. So essentially, these emails are like the electronic version of a postcard, where anybody can read them if they happen to be within the transmission path. So it's really important to Google that all of our users' communications are secure, and we are strongly encouraging other providers to start supporting TLS. To that end, one of the things you're going to hear me mention a lot today is that transparency is very important to Google. We have seen that shining a light on information can help lead to positive change throughout the industry. And one example of how we do that is our transparency report. So most people are familiar these days with the part of our transparency report that deals with government requests, either for the removal of content or for user data. But we also have sections of the transparency report you might not be as familiar with, and these sections have to do with security. And the one in the little red box is one of the newest additions to our report, and that's the safer email part of the transparency report, which we launched in 2014. And this is highlighting the current state of email encryption in transit. So this graph, I printed it out not long before this presentation, and it shows the current state of affairs. The top one is the outbound. So at this point, about 82% of the messages that are leaving Gmail going to other providers are encrypted in transit. The bottom part of the graph is inbound, which is a lower percentage, showing about 58% of the incoming messages were supporting TLS. So Google is only one of the endpoints in both of these graphs, so we can't control the actual numbers, but we've seen that publishing these numbers has actually made them go up, which is a really good thing, and hopefully it'll continue to do so. In addition to TLS, one of the other things that we find very important is the use of HTTPS. We've been supportive of that for years. And one of the things that we did somewhat recently in August 2014 was we actually added HTTPS as a ranking signal in search. So what that means is our algorithm, as it's looking and deciding what order to place the search results, one of the things that it considers is whether the website uses HTTPS. And you will see on this graph something that we found somewhat interesting. This is at the time that we launched this in 2014, so the relevant time frame, the top 1 million sites. And these are the sites that were using HTTPS by default. And that arrow is pointing to when we launched it as a signal, and you can see after that the line goes up pretty steeply. So moving on from encryption, I'm now going to talk about a different aspect of our security strategy, which is keeping all of our user accounts secure. As everybody knows, phishing and identity theft are major threats to internet users around the world, not just Google users, but all users of internet services. And we're proud to say that we have some very strong industry standard account protections, and we've also sort of declared a war on the password, trying to deal with the various issues that come from how insecure and vulnerable passwords can be. And I'm going to talk to you about a few of those things. One of them is challenges. So even though you've entered a correct password, that doesn't necessarily mean that the account owner has authorized you to use their account. So because passwords are vulnerable, if our system detects that a particular login seems particularly risky, maybe it's not coming from the type of device you usually log in with, maybe it's coming from a different area of the world, we might ask you a few more questions to see if it really is the user and the access is authorized. If you get one of these emails, it might mean that somebody got that test and failed it, or that for some other reason we thought that a login, even though it was with the correct password, might not be you. And so if that's the case, we might send you an email that looks like this, telling you that someone might have your password and asking you to look into your account and make sure that this access was authorized, and if it wasn't, take steps to secure your account. This is one of the things that you can do after you receive one of these messages. At the bottom of the Gmail interface is a link to show you some recent account activity. And what you can do is look and see what type of accesses have been made to your account recently and from where. If you see something that shouldn't be there, we have a number of different ways that you can go and look at your account activity, including there's a new account security dashboard that has a significant amount of information about the devices and accesses to your account. And we also have a new account security checklist. And if you use that, you can walk through the various things we've learned that help keep your account safe, and you can update things that are out of date. By combining these methods and more, since 2011, we have seen a reduction in hijacking of Google accounts by more than half. And in addition, Google accounts are one of the most expensive accounts to buy on the black market, and we think that's because they're so difficult for the bad guys to get a hold of. Another thing I want to talk to you about today, anytime I get in front of a large audience of people who either work in security or know people who are particularly security sensitive, I encourage you to use two-step verification. Google launched two-step verification as an option for our Google accounts in 2011, and many other providers now offer the same. So two-step verification, of course, is in addition to authenticating with something you know, which is your password, you're also going to have to authenticate with something you have. So when it first started, the something you have was a one-time security code. You could generate that either by printing them out so you can put it in your wallet. You could have the Google Authenticator app on your phone. You could ask Google to text you or call you with a number. All of those things were available, but we've been iterating on that since we first launched to try to do everything we can to make it easier to use two-step verification. Because one of the things we've learned about security is that if it's too difficult or cumbersome, or if even there's the perception of it being too difficult, users just won't do it, no matter how good it is for them. So one of the things that we've launched recently is the security key. and it's particularly useful for people who are at high risk. It's a USB-based token, and we use it for all of our accounts actually at Google, so my google.com account requires the use of a security key, and now it's available to the public. The keys are relatively inexpensive. You can get them on Amazon, but that's the key, the main point of that is that it's not phishable. So phishers could not ask you for that code and then get into your account, which a dedicated person might actually try to do. And on top of that, they won't actually work if the website that's asking for your Google account password is not the Google website. Finally, and this is newer, this is Password Alert. At the moment, it's a Chrome extension. This is another innovation that actually came from things that we were actually doing at Google on our own network for Google users that we've now pushed out in a version for the public. And this Chrome extension will alert you if you've typed your Google account password into another website. And the reason for that is that password reuse is one of the biggest security problems for account users. Unfortunately, we see a number of breaches these days where entire dumps of user credentials are put out on the internet. And since so many websites require pretty complicated passwords, some users are resorting to creating one really complicated password and then using it everywhere. Now, that complicated password might be difficult to brute force, but once it's out there, all of the accounts that you have using it can be compromised. So, Password Alert will catch you if you either are about to accidentally type your password into a site that isn't Google, or it will also alert you if you're about to go to a phishing page that's designed to look like Google's page but isn't. So moving on from account security, there are a couple of other areas I wanted to talk about, and those are the Chrome browser and safe browsing. So both of those are related to how we protect users as they're out and about navigating the internet. So the first thing about Chrome that we're going to be talking about is auto updates, and then we're going to talk about safe browsing and how safe browsing crawls the web every day looking for bad sites and warn our users and the users of other browsers before they can get infected. So this graph is for Chrome. And as we know, software is never perfect. Even at Google, we sometimes have bugs and vulnerabilities. But the key is how you respond. And at Google, we think the most important thing is to respond quickly and get patches out to our users as quickly as possible. So that's why Chrome auto updates. So the way that usually happens is when you restart the browser, you'll get the newest version of Chrome. If you haven't restarted your browser for a while, and if there's new versions, the corner of your screen will start changing color to warn you that you should restart your browser, but that's it. That's all you're going to have to do, and you're going to have the latest fixes. I think all of us have had times where we get an alert telling us that our software is out of date and we need to update it, and we put it and push it away, ask it to remind us later because we don't have time. And unfortunately, that means that a lot of users are out there using software that's out of date. At the time that we launched Auto Update, it was controversial, but now it's an industry standard. And if you look at this graph, what it is most important is the angle of the line here. And it shows how quickly we're getting our updates out to our users. One of the important things, though, about auto-updating, of course, is that users would not have accepted it if auto-updates had broke their machines. So it's really critical that you have strong engineering discipline if you're going to be using auto-updates, because users are not going to use your product, or they won't accept auto-updates if they're not stable and secure at the time they launch. All right, so Chrome isn't the only browser out there. We happen to think it's a really good one, but we want all users to be protected. And that's why our safe browsing platform is available to the public. Right now, in addition to Chrome, Firefox and Safari are using Google's safe browsing data. We also make it available via an API, and it's available for users on desktops and on mobile devices. Right now, our estimate is about almost 40% of users around the world are protected by safe browsing. I think Mary Meeker's most recent Internet Trends report had the number of Internet users at about 2.6 billion, and safe browsing is protected about 1.1 billion, so about 40%. We hope that will go up. The key to safe browsing is that we're looking for sites that are either we think are malware or phishing, so that we can show warnings to our users before they actually enter those sites and become vulnerable. So this is an example of a safe browsing warning. So if you're browsing the internet and you get this, it's probably a good idea to stop. And we are constantly innovating with the best way to reach our users with these types of messages. Right now, it's basically just red, hopefully the universal sign, no matter your language, that there's danger ahead. So this screen may change over time as we try to find better ways to communicate with the users. But the basic premise is that you should stop because we've detected that the site is dangerous. We also recently rolled out this protection to Chrome on Android. So it's part of the most recent version of Google Play services. So if you've got an up-to-date Android device, it's automatically available to you. One thing I didn't mention is Chrome also has protections for downloads. So if you are about to download malware or a harmful program to your computer, we'll give you a warning. And that same type of warning is available in the Play Store. So if you're about to download an app that might be malicious, we'll also give you a warning. In all of these cases, the best approach is not to continue with your action. So as I've mentioned a few times, transparency is big at Google, and safe browsing is also one of the sections of our transparency report. So that section of the report is actually really interesting. So if you haven't been there before, I'd urge you to go and look at it. It has some interesting information and shows some interesting trends, but I'm just going to show you a few pieces of it today. So this is two different graphs. The first one is showing the number of users who see browser warnings per week, and the bottom one is the number of users who see the warnings in search. So the example I showed previously was the type of warning that you'll get in your browser. But when you're doing a Google search, we show the warning in the search results so that users can be aware of dangerous sites before they even click on the links. So when these graphs were ran in the week of November 15th, there were almost 21 million users seeing browser warnings, and there were almost 45,000, a little more than 44.6 million that were seeing the warnings in their search results. So that is pretty significant. And the graphs can be interesting because sometimes when you go back over time, you can see when there were major exploits that hit the wild. So there was, in 2012, you saw the black hole exploit campaign, and the numbers just went through the roof. So this can be really interesting from a security research perspective as well. Now, these two graphs show some information about the number of sites that we're detecting. So the prior graph was the warnings we give, and this is about when we're detecting bad sites. So the green is malware. So these are sites that are trying to install programs that are malicious. And the blue is phishing sites, so deceptive sites that might, for example, try to pretend to be your bank in order to get your username and password. So those numbers in November 2015 were pretty equal, so about 25,000 for malware and almost 24,000 for phishing. The bottom graph, though, is the one that might be more interesting for the people in this audience, especially if there are any webmasters in the audience. And those are the type of sites that we're finding that are hosting malware. So the green, which is the bulk of the sites, are actually compromised sites. So these aren't sites that are designed to be bad. These are regular, legitimate websites that have been compromised and have some pages that are hosting malware. That number was about 25,000 the week of November 15th. The blue at the bottom, which you can barely see, is the number of attack sites whose only purpose is to distribute malware. And that number is really low, so it's only about 1,000 that week. And we think that this is important to see because most of the malware these days is actually on legitimate sites, and it could be your site. And as a result of that, your site might be flagged in search results, or users navigating there might get a warning, which probably isn't something that you want. Luckily, however, we offer a lot of tools to webmasters and network administrators so that we can get these things cleared up. The first one is if you're a network administrator, you can sign up for safe browsing alerts, and that way we will send you alerts when there are sites on your system that have malware so that you can work with the webmaster to get them cleaned up. And if you're an individual webmaster, we also have a free service called Webmaster Tools. And it's actually great. So if you haven't signed up for it, I would encourage you to do so. And through Webmaster Tools, you can actually do a number of things. There's some really interesting things you can do to look at how optimized your site is for search. But for our purposes, you can also get advice on how to clean up your site. So we will, if we detect your site has shown up in safe browsing and you're signed up for Webmaster Tools, we're going to send you a notification through that account and let you know that the account's been flagged, give you some examples of exploit code that we might have found on the site, and have a number of resources to help you get it cleaned up. Once you have cleaned it, you can then, through your account, ask us to rescan so that you can get your account back out there without warnings as quickly as possible. Of course, if you haven't signed up for the Webmaster Tools account, we'll still try to get a hold of you. We'll send messages to the common webmaster email addresses, such as webmaster@, info@, or admin@ your domain. But the best way to get these notices is through the Webmaster Tools. So I've mostly been talking about technology type of solutions to security problems, but of course, people are a big part of the solution as well. So we see that in two ways, and that's the people that we hire, and I'll talk about that a little bit, and the things that they actually do for Google, and also people who don't work for Google but spend time searching for vulnerabilities in our products and then telling us about them. So the latter one that I was just talking about is our Vulnerability Rewards program. When we first launched this program in 2010, it was unusual, but nowadays bug bounty programs are pretty common. At this point, we have awarded more than $4 million to security researchers who have identified flaws and bugs in our services and responsibly reported them to us. We recently hit a new high for an individual award. There was a $150,000 reward that went to a researcher for a Chrome OS exploit. But the program has also expanded quite a bit. It now covers almost all of Google's web applications. It covers Chrome. It covers Android, which is a more recent addition. And we also have a patch rewards program, which encourages security researchers to find security issues in very popular open source projects, and we will also give rewards for those. We find that this program is really important. It's important to have a good relationship with the security community. We think it's important that when people spend time working on finding these types of issues with our products, that they get rewarded for them. And we also think that it's a good way to make sure that people are responsibly reporting vulnerabilities, which we think is really important. We also focus a lot on the people that we hire to work in security and in all aspects of Google. One of those people is Parisa Tabriz. You might have heard of her. She's been in the news quite a bit lately. She's actually the security lead for Chrome, which I talked about quite a bit today. But not only is she an amazing engineer and she works really hard to make sure that we have the best products at Google, she also does a lot of work to evangelize security and to make sure that people, and I mean everyday people, users, and family members are thinking about security and not just engineers. So Parisa is a great example of the type of people that we hire at Google and how they actually interface with the security community as a whole. We also have a new team called Project Zero. So Google has a long tradition of having our employees do work on things that are important to the security community that aren't necessarily on Google projects. So that's been going on for a long time. One of the recent discoveries by one of Google engineers was actually the Heartbleed vulnerability to OpenSSL that was disclosed, I think, in April of 2014. Not long after that, we decided to actually create a full-time team of engineers who work just on trying to find 0 days in very commonly used software products and responsibly disclose them. So that team is Project Zero. They have a blog, and so like most Google projects, transparency is very important to this team. So they have a blog where they talk about the various vulnerabilities that they've disclosed after the period to fix the vulnerability has passed. So that's an interesting project and something that you might be interested in going and learning more about. So that's it. We covered some various ways that Google is looking at security, and hopefully it was useful. Thank you very much.